The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com.
Welcome to the bonus show. Some interesting stories for you. One has to do with Mexico. We talked about the outgoing president of Mexico on the regular show. Now we're going to talk about the incoming Mexican president. The Mexican government has a Boeing 787, which is sort of like the Mexican Air Force One. It's the presidential aircraft that Mexico acquired back in 2012 for more than $218 million. They are now selling it. It's only been a few days since the new Mexican president, Obrador, took office, but he is already putting into action his campaign promise of selling the presidential plane and using the proceeds to help poor communities in Mexico. He hasn't done that part yet, but they're starting to get rid of the plane. And that he will be flying commercial. He said, "I will not get on the presidential plane. I would be embarrassed. My face would be filled with shame if I board such a luxurious plane in a country with so much poverty." And he is flying commercial. He is often subject to delays, Pat, as happens in commercial aviation. I say good for him, although I do question, only as devil's advocate, would he be more effective in fighting poverty if he didn't have the cumulative effect of years of flight delays and going through security? Like, I'm not saying I agree or disagree with what he's doing. I think it's a fantastic show of, and I don't mean show facetiously, it's a fantastic putting his money where his mouth is, that he really does care about poverty. And it doesn't make sense for him to have a private Boeing 787 when so many people are living in poverty. I think that's all great. But if we're talking over the course of his presidential term, hundreds of hours of delays and additional travel time as a result of this, might he not do more to help poverty if he had the private plane? I don't know.
Yeah, I don't doubt that he will get less work done, but it's important to him as a politician to be perceived as a man of the people, and I think he's doing a good job at that. He's also only going to take 40% of the presidential salary, and he's disbanding the Mexican equivalent of the Secret Service, which I find incredibly interesting because as president of the country, you do have a target on your back. You're going to have some haters, and everyone just about can recognize you. So I don't even know if that's a smart move. I don't think it's something that I would do if I was president.
I agree. I probably wouldn't. And I do find it interesting. I find Mexico to be such a fascinating country. And I'm trying to I've never been to Mexico City. I'm trying to get there within the next year. My dad is in Mexico right now, and he's actually been doing some lecturing in some of the less cosmopolitan parts of Mexico. And, you know, there's some tough situations in Mexico. He described security circumstances at some of the places he stayed as being very tense, and a lot of care being taken to ensure that my dad doesn't go to the wrong place, so to speak. So definitely a lot of issues that Mexico is contending with, but it's just such a fascinating country, huge country, diverse culturally because of all of the different, you have sort of Mexican national culture, but then you have so many subcultures within Mexico that are fascinating. I'm personally super interested, Pat, in following the presidency and seeing what actually happens during this term.
Yeah, I might be going there actually in the next couple of months, and I would be looking forward to that if it indeed does transpire. I know that you follow South American politics quite a bit. This story actually reminded me of the former president of Uruguay. He was considered the people's president. He lived in some small shack for a home, and essentially is doing what AMLO plans to do, but on steroids, you could say.
Yeah, the Uruguayan president had a Volkswagen Beetle that he continued driving, as far as I recall, at least kind of like as a daily driver while he was president. Mujica was the president there. He's no longer in office. Very interesting guy. Very interesting guy. Let's talk about former NFL quarterback Brett Favre for a little bit. He has now apologized, claiming that he was tricked into recording an anti-Semitic video for an organization claiming to represent veterans. The one group called the Handsome Truth and another called the Goyim Defense League, both known anti-Semitic groups, paid Brett Favre $500 to read a script that included coded language and dog whistles. And when it became clear that he had no idea what he was saying and it was grossly anti-Semitic, he has now apologized. So let me tell you what the script was. First of all, does Brett Favre need to be doing this for $500? It would be really weird to me to learn that he needs the $500. I don't know his financial situation. The paragraph he read for $500 was, Brett Favre here with a shout out to the Handsome Truth and the GDL boys. You guys are patriots in my eyes, so keep waking them up and don't let the small get you down. Keep fighting too. And don't ever forget the USS Liberty and the men and women who died on that day. God bless and take care. So, first of all, this entire waking them up thing, that's a term used by the anti-Semites and by the men's rights and right-wing extremist groups to talk about being red-pilled awakenings politically. That includes a whole bunch of white men or really the oppressed people type of stuff and a lot of other things. Don't let the small get you down. The small is an anti-Semitic reference to yarmulkes, the head coverings, or kippas, as they are also known, head coverings that more religious Jews wear. The USS Liberty is a dog whistle for anti-Semites. That was a research ship that was attacked by Israel during the Six-Day War in 1967. It was mistaken by Israeli forces for an Egyptian ship. So Brett Favre claiming that he was tricked, others apparently also tricked by these groups. And he put out a statement saying basically that he does these all the time, that he's done like 50 of these, that some of them match service dogs to veterans who have PTSD, all sorts of other stuff. And later he learned that the request actually was from an anti-Semitic group and that he is sickened by these groups and he's against what they do, what they're doing and what they stand for. I believe the guy, Pat, because I don't think that he would. I have no reason to think that even if Brett Favre was anti-Semitic, and I have no reason to think that he is, I think he's smart enough that he wouldn't say, I'm going to do this, but then if there's a problem, I'll claim I didn't know anything about it. I think he just genuinely got tricked. You could say he didn't do enough due diligence. That would be a fair criticism, but I think that's about as far as we can go.
I think you give him the full exoneration. That was my one critique, though. Like, maybe he didn't do enough due diligence, but the problem is the language is so incredibly coded, and if you're not into these alt-right anti-Semitic tropes, you may just not understand them. Like, if I was to read this, I probably wouldn't pick up on it either. The one thing I would question is, don't let the small get you down. Like, I have no idea what that means, so I would probably look into that. He could do a quick Google search on what the USS Liberty is, but it just sounds like a message in support of the troops more than anything else. And he's done about 50 of these messages on Candid, I think it's called. So he's, I think, just in the routine and didn't expect anything to come out of this.
Don't you think, though, that Goyim Defense League should have maybe been a red flag, and you maybe Google that one and see what that is?
Goyim Defense League. Yeah. Well, but it's GDL, though. So, I don't know.
They do shorten it GDL. Yeah, so I don't know exactly how it was presented to him.
It's not Candid, it's Cameo, by the way. Just correcting myself there.
Cameo, okay. Thank you. So anyway, I don't think that, I think if anything, Brett Favre is guilty of ignorance and not doing enough research, but I have no reason to think that Brett Favre is an anti-Semite. A lot of people will be surprised to hear me say that because they say, I call everybody an anti-Semite, but of course, I don't. I didn't call Brett Favre one, that's for sure. Okay, speaking of anti-Semitism, the white nationalist who drove a car into the crowd of counter-protesters at that horrible Charlottesville, Virginia rally last year began sobbing and whimpering after his arrest when police told him he killed someone, according to video that was played at his trial yesterday. Before the rally, he had sent his mom an image of Adolf Hitler. That was evidence presented during the hearing. And then also this video taken within minutes of the end of the mayhem at that rally shows him saying that he acted in self-defense, but also sobbing and crying as a result of being told that he killed someone. What do you think about this, Pat? I mean, should that video of him crying be a mitigating factor in terms of guilt or innocence or for sentencing? Or is it, listen, he acted in a way that was willfully neglectful and aggressive by starting to run people over. It's a form of vehicular homicide. the fact that later he cried doesn't really change too much about what the crime was that was committed here.
Maybe so, because if you're trying to distinguish between premeditated murder, like first-degree murder, and heat-of-the-moment murder, second degree, I think how he initially reacts when he finds out that the person was killed is relevant, because I have to imagine that if he planned something like this, he wouldn't feel automatically remorseful for what he did, because that's what he set out to do. Whereas if it's manslaughter or heat of the moment, he could feel that regret right off the bat. So I do think there's some relevance to that piece of information.
Well, what if it was premeditated and he still cried, right? I mean, that's the thing where we don't know. We know what actions were taken. We don't know someone's mindset always in terms of premeditation, and we don't know the mindset that goes into someone sobbing. All we really know is what happened. So I don't know. I'm kind of mixed about it, but I understand that his defense attorneys are doing the best job they can, and he's entitled to the best possible defense. Of course, I don't even suggest denying any of that. I'm just sort of wondering, if I was a juror, what the impact would be on me of that video.
I think there are three possibilities for why he's crying there. One is that he realizes the error of his ways and that white nationalism is a deplorable viewpoint to have. Another one would be that he wanted to hurt people, like he wanted to make sure that these counter-protesters got theirs, but he didn't want to kill anyone. I mean, like, come on, that's just way too far. And then the third would be that, you know, he just has this selfish reaction to it. Like, he understands that because he killed someone, he's likely going to spend the rest of his life behind bars. And you don't know exactly which one of those three it is, and you can draw different conclusions from all three of those.
Well, there's a fourth one, which is that these were sobs of joy, and that hasn't that I think you should also be mentioning, Pat, in your list of possibilities there. We're going to be following the trial. We'll see what ultimately happens. I do want to hear from you about it. Thank you to all of our new members. Thanks to our new patrons. Really appreciate everybody's support. We are starting to wind down 2018, and we have really big things planned for next year, and I'll be able to tell you about some of those, hopefully before the end of the month.
The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com.